Warning. This video contains references to depression, suicide, racism, sexism, sexual assault, and verbal assault. Thank you, and please stay safe. Hello, geeks, freaks, and all those unique. This is Emcee Frodis. Pardon the absolute ice-cold take, but this was a very hard one for me to write. When I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and it took years to find the right combination of medication and therapy to just get through the day. One of the biggest weapons I had against my suicide ideation was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. When I wanted to kill myself, I told myself that if I did, I wouldn't be able to find out what happened next on Buffy, which helped for 8 years. For that, I'm always going to be grateful. To this day, Buffy and Angel remain amongst my favorite television shows. I want to put that out in front before I get into this. It's tough for me to judge things from an unbiased perspective because of how I feel about the works of Joss Whedon. But honestly, I have to. I've been processing my feelings about this for years at this point because of how much both Buffy and Angel meant to me, and I want to share that process with you. I've been thinking about doing this video for years. It's been something I've put off because it's just not a fun thing for me to address. I'm someone who loves Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. I've never made that a secret. But it hasn't been an easy time to be a fan of those works. For anyone who has wondered why my podcast Return to the Hellmouth hasn't been updated, this is a big reason why. It can be tough to discuss the series without seeming like you're excusing Whedon's actions. One of the first videos I did for this channel was actually in defense of Whedon. This was back in 2017 and discussed Whedon as a storyteller. I didn't get into him as a person because we really didn't know a lot back then. My video was made about 6 months before Kai Cole even wrote about her treatment by Whedon. We did know that Whedon's treatment of Charisma Carpenter was questionable, but we didn't know the true extent of it. When I made the video, most of the criticism surrounding Whedon was examining his writing. After Cole's revelations, I made the video private. I wasn't comfortable with that being my public statement on the problematic nature of Whedon. I think I'm going to reference that video for historical context within this one. With all of that being said, the court of public opinion is brought to order. This is the case of the fans v. Joss Whedon.
The fact of the matter is, if I'm not putting people through the paces, if I'm not giving them real pain and real loss and real hardship and sometimes real tragedy, then I'm not a storyteller.
So let's start with some background. Before we delve into what's happened, we need to understand Joss Whedon, the man and the creator. Joseph Hill Whedon was born in 1964, part of a Hollywood writing dynasty going back to the beginning of commercial television with his grandfather John Whedon, a writer on The Donna Reed Show and The Dick Van Dyke Show. His father Tom wrote for Alice and the Golden Girls. His mother Lee was a teacher, writer, and activist. Whedon would claim in a recent and very controversial interview with Vulture that his parents were verbally abusive if Whedon and his brothers weren't entertaining or clever. He would also cite his parents' divorce as a catalyst for his difficulty with relationships. Like his grandfather and father, Whedon started his career in sitcoms with work on Roseanne and Parenthood. In 1992, he would first work on the property which would earn him the most notoriety, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was released as a movie starring Christy Swanson and Luke Perry. Whedon disowned this version, feeling his original vision was being mishandled, leaving the production partway through. Despite Whedon's misgivings, the movie, while not a commercial success, became a cult hit. There would be enough interest in Buffy that when Whedon built up his reputation further with works on screenplays for Alien Resurrection, Toy Story, and Titan AE, he was able to resurrect his story about the teenaged vampire slayer. While not an immediate hit, Buffy proved to be a solid vehicle for the fledgling WB network. By mid-season 2, it had secured its place in the zeitgeist of popular culture with its witty dialogue, subversion of tropes, and focus on female empowerment. The show aired for 7 seasons. Buffy's success would lead to a spin-off about her vampire love interest Angel in 1999. While Buffy was a metaphor for high school and college, Angel was about moving to a new city, supporting yourself, and eventually having a family. It would air for 5 seasons. In 2002, Whedon reached a sci-fi audience with the short-lived but beloved space western Firefly, about the crew of the Serenity. While Buffy reached a natural conclusion, both Angel and Firefly were cancelled by their respective networks. This created an image of Whedon as a creative visionary, constantly being maligned by the network system he was trapped in. This image would be codified by the creation of Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog, a musical Whedon self-funded and made during the Writers Guild of America strike in late 2007. Whedon would attempt a television show once more, creating Dollhouse as a vehicle for Buffy alum Eliza Dushku. The sci-fi thriller wouldn't enjoy the same success as other projects, and was cancelled after 2 seasons. By this time, Whedon seemed to be done with network television, turning his attention fully to movies. Along with former Buffy writer Drew Goddard, Whedon wrote Cabin in the Woods, a movie subverting the tropes in the slasher horror genre. The next year, Whedon would truly cement himself as a mainstream powerhouse when he wrote and directed The Avengers, the first of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's team-up movies, and the grand finale of Phase 1. Following The Avengers, he returned briefly to television to write and direct the pilot episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., a spin-off of The Avengers Whedon would be executive producer on, while his brother Jed and sister-in-law Marissa Takaron served as showrunners. Whedon would continue to work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, making the sequel to Avengers, The Age of Ultron. While a commercial success, the critical and audience reception was lukewarm. Whedon's difficulty with studios would begin to crop up once again as he placed the critical problems firmly on the studio. Due to the interconnected nature of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there were requirements necessary to set up future films, as well as references that were needed to be made to previous ones. Whedon made no secret his distaste for this sort of structured movie creation. Age of Ultron would be his final work for Marvel. He would stay in the comic book movie genre, being hired by Marvel's competitor DC to rewrite Zack Snyder's Justice League movie. After Snyder suffered a family tragedy, Whedon was brought in to direct the scenes he had rewritten. Justice League would serve as a definitive point of decline for Whedon's career. Despite having the 24th largest opening of all time, a steep loss in viewership led to Justice League losing Warner Brothers $60 million. The movie was declared a definitive flop by the box office, critics, and fans alike. The movie's poor reviews were particularly focused on the areas of the film which were reshot by Whedon. It was criticized for its poor pacing, underdeveloped villain, poor rhythm and mood, and lack of connectivity with previous DC movies. Because of the horrible reception to Whedon's rewrites, multiple campaigns to release the Snyder Cut were made, eventually leading to Warner Brothers giving Zack Snyder money to complete his vision of the film. With his cinematic career on the rocks, Whedon went back to television, this time developing the show The Nevers for HBO. He would exit the show before even a single episode aired. While it was claimed this was due to creative differences, the exit would follow the harshest blow to Whedon's career. This was about more than just critical and box office stumbles. There was a side of Whedon fans hadn't seen, or at least had ignored up until now.
I think it, I say it. It's my way.
There have been multiple times over the years where Joss Whedon's personal character have been called into question. However, for a majority of the public, it seems like the fall of Joss Whedon was started with Ray Fisher, the actor who played Cyborg in Justice League. In June 2020, Fisher posted a clip of himself promoting the movie where he complimented Whedon, saying Snyder had chosen a worthy successor. However, on July of the same year, Fisher wrote a tweet stating that the set of Justice League with Whedon was gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable towards the cast and crew. Fisher didn't elaborate on his statements due to a non-disclosure agreement that was still in effect. Fisher would accuse producers Jeff Johns, John Berg, Warner Brother Group chairman Toby Emmerich of creating a toxic environment on the set of Justice League along with Whedon. Fellow Justice League cast members Jason Momoa and Gal Gadot publicly supported Fisher. Gadot would admit that she had her own experiences with Whedon, but she didn't elaborate on the situation. But there were rumors from other sources. Specifically, it was rumored that Gadot would not film a sexualized scene in which the Flash fell into her breasts. Gadot was reportedly locked in a room until she would film the scene, and when she continued to refuse, the scene was eventually filmed using a body double. She would later say that Whedon threatened to end her career if she didn't do what he said. Not long after Fisher made his initial claims, director Kevin Smith said on his podcast Fat Man Beyond he had heard rumors from a crew member that Whedon was disparaging Snyder despite Snyder having a wonderful relationship with the cast and crew. Fisher's comments were enough to launch an investigation by Warner Media. Little is known about the effects of this investigation, other than remedial actions were taken. Once the investigation was completed in October 2020, Fisher revealed some of the problems behind the scenes. Specifically, he cited Whedon's diminishment of people of color within the plot of Justice League by cutting much of Cyborg's plot from the movie and literally lightening the skin tone of a black actor in post-production. In November 2020, it was announced Whedon would leave the production on the Nevers. Fisher tweeted that it was definitely a case of HBO wanting to distance themselves from Whedon due to the bad publicity around him. However, Fisher would also face consequences for the situation with Whedon, revealing in January 2021 that Cyborg's cameo in The Flash was removed due to his public condemnation of Whedon. Fisher's allegations against Whedon were not the first time Whedon was accused of wrongdoing, and it was definitely not the last. Honestly, if you look at everything that's happened, there's a hideous Ouroboros of wrongdoing that has been known for years, but never paid attention to until now. As mentioned in the introduction, there were rumors for years about what happened with Charisma Carpenter on the set of Angel, but that was all that was really known, in that Whedon chose to fire Carpenter following the 4th season of Angel due to her pregnancy forcing an alteration in the storyline. The story of Whedon's wrongdoings that really first gained public traction were the allegations made by Whedon's ex-wife Kai Cole. Cole and Whedon were married from 1995 to 2016, although they separated in 2012. In 2017, Cole wrote an essay for The Wrap on her relationship with Whedon. Cole called Whedon a hypocrite preaching feminist ideals. When Cole would become uncomfortable with Whedon's close relationship with other women, he would claim it was innocent and it was just that he was a feminist and preferred the company of women. This was not the case. For years, Whedon gaslit Cole into believing she was just paranoid about him potentially having affairs. She wrote that when he did finally admit to his numerous infidelities, she couldn't accept how his betrayal of her could match with the image she had had of him for so long. Whedon eventually left Cole, and she had to pick up the pieces of her life, having put so much of herself into being the wife of Joss Whedon rather than being Kai Cole. The breakup of their marriage left her with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. When Cole's blog post about Whedon came out, it was incredibly upsetting to longtime fans, and the reasons that, well, we all kind of knew it was true. Nothing Cole had written seemed like it was out of the realm of possibility for things Whedon would do. In fact, Whedon's close relationship with various women in his sphere have often made fans wonder if he was having an extramarital affair. And I'm sorry to say that a lot of fans just kind of wondered who Whedon was sleeping with. When Cole quoted from the letters Whedon had written her, they sounded like his writing. Cole's post would affect the Buffy fandom. The website Whedon-esque would shut down after operating for 15 years. But honestly, not a lot changed. There were a few think pieces, but for the most part, Whedon went on with his career almost completely untouched. In terms of his public persona, while I did, and still do, believe Kai Cole, and I absolutely hate what she went through, a large part of me felt it wasn't my business, and I think a lot of people felt that way too. We thought Whedon was an asshole for what he had done in his marriage, but in the end, he hadn't done anything illegal or even that out of the ordinary. But Fisher supported someone else in his tweets. As the serpent swallows its own tail, that person came forward to support Ray Fisher. The rumors that had been whispered for years finally came to light, as Charisma Carpenter publicly made clear her own mistreatment at the hands of Whedon. Carpenter played Cordelia Chase on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. She was one of the longest-running characters, even being in the pilot presentation of Buffy. On Buffy, Cordelia would be a supporting character, as the popular mean girl who would eventually date Buffy's friend Xander and become a part of the Scooby Gang. She was promoted to Deuteragonist on Angel, serving as the titular character's seer, secretary, a champion in her own right, and eventually Angel's love interest. She would remain in this role until the 4th season of Angel. Over the course of that season, the character would receive amnesia, get her memory back, seduce Angel's teenage son Connor, before being revealed to be possessed by a higher power who had Cordelia impregnated by Connor in order to give birth to itself. In the episode Inside Out, Cordelia gave birth and fell into a coma. Cordelia spent the next 5 episodes being shown in that coma before being whisked away in the finale home to receive medical treatment for a majority of season 5. Whedon attributed the uneven writing on Cordelia's character in season 4 to Carpenter's pregnancy. He claimed that Carpenter had told him very belatedly she was pregnant, far too late for him to change a majority of the story. He was forced to make quick changes. When all was said and done, he felt like they had gone as far as they could with Cordelia's character, and she would not fit into the retool that Season 5 was going through. Carpenter would return for one episode in Season 5, the acclaimed 100th episode, You're Welcome. In that episode, Cordelia awakens from her coma, helps Angel realize the folly of his current path, before it's revealed she died in her coma, and it was her spirit guiding him all along. Fandom knew for years that Carpenter and Whedon had fallen out due to Carpenter's pregnancy. Neither of them really made it a secret. Whedon did make it seem like it was only the affected general storyline, and he found a way around it. And yes, Cordelia was leaving the show, but so was Vincent Kartheiser's character of Connor. They even got rid of the Hyperion Hotel. Everything was changing. Yeah, no one really bought that. For nearly 20 years, the fans whispered to each other that Charisma Carpenter was fired because she had the audacity to have a real life, and in early February 2021, Carpenter confirmed that. But she elaborated on the situation, and it was even worse than we thought. Carpenter alleged that Whedon passive-aggressively attacked her on both the sets of Buffy and Angel. He would threaten to fire her idly, and he judged her for the tattoo of a rosary she had done to connect with her religious spirituality. When Carpenter became pregnant during Season 4, Whedon avoided phone calls from her agent that would have informed him of the situation. When he was finally informed, he asked Carpenter in a private meeting if she was going to keep it. He then proceeded to mock her religion and accused her of sabotaging the show. While she was pregnant, he would call her fat when she only weighed 126 pounds. Despite a doctor's notice from Carpenter to work fewer hours, he scheduled a 1 a.m. shoot, the stress of which caused Carpenter to have Braxton Hicks contractions. Carpenter said that Whedon was mean and biting, would disparage people publicly, and openly played favorites with his actors. She spent years in denial of the poor treatment she had suffered on the set, but through years of therapy and Ray Fisher coming forward with his own allegations, she felt like she could finally speak out. Carpenter's announcement was just the start. More information about Whedon's behavior on the sets of Buffy, Angel, and Firefly came quickly. While neither confirming nor denying anything, Buffy star Sarah Michelle Gellar released a statement. While I am proud to have my name associated with Buffy Summers, I don't want to be forever associated with Joss Whedon. She then proceeded to say that she stood with and believed those who had come out. Amber Benson, who played witch Tara McClay, backed Carpenter's claims, stating the set of Buffy was toxic and the toxicity started from the top. James Marsters, who played Spike on both Buffy and Angel, said that the sets were not without their challenges. He had previously related a story where Whedon pinned him to a wall and threatened to kill off his character because he was unhappy with how popular Spike was. Some of the most disturbing allegations came from Michelle Trachtenberg, who played Buffy's younger sister Dawn. Trachtenberg said that Whedon's behavior with her was not appropriate, and there was a rule on set that he wasn't allowed to be alone with her. Trachtenberg was only 17 when Buffy ended. She didn't elaborate further on what exactly Whedon said or did, but the Vulture profile on Whedon said that a private meeting during Season 7 left Trachtenberg shaken, and the rule was put into place. The talk from the Buffy side of things didn't just include actors, but writers also chimed in with their interactions with Whedon. Jose Molina, who wrote 2 episodes of Firefly, called Whedon casually cruel and that he especially liked to make female writers cry. Whedon allegedly bragged about making one writer cry twice during one meeting. Tie-in writer Jeff Marriott backed up the accusations by the actors, stating he had met both them and Whedon in the past. The allegations matched with things he had heard. He also had his own experiences with Whedon's casual cruelty. He said he pretends to be a feminist, and he can pull off the pretense for a while. But when the spotlight's off, the truth emerges. One of the biggest names in terms of writing to speak up was Marty Noxon, who was the most powerful producer on the show after Whedon. She supported the claims made by the actresses and linked to an essay she'd written about toxic sets she'd worked on. In the Vulture profile, writer Rebecca X, formerly Rebecca Rand Kirshner, spoke about Whedon calling her fat while she was pregnant and messing with her chair while she was pitching an episode. She didn't call either of these incidents abusive, but she seemed conflicted about denying the set was toxic. She definitely called Whedon a dick, though, and admitted he'd brought her to tears once. The Vulture profile on Whedon went past his misdeeds on set, interviewing 3 women he had been in relationships with after his divorce. I won't go into all of the details because, again, private life, but it shows a pattern of infidelity and lack of respect for his partners. The most salacious of the claims of his ex-girlfriends was that one was sent DVDs of Dollhouse, and then they proceeded to engage in a dominant, submissive relationship with Whedon as owner and doll, confirming to many fans what had been previously thought, that Dollhouse was little more than a sexual fantasy for Whedon. I don't want to kink shame anyone, and Whedon and his ex were consenting adults, but Dollhouse is basically about human trafficking. Whedon's want to use it as sexual fodder is, well, icky. Is it possible these people are lying? Yeah, it's always possible. Is it probable? I mean, not really. Almost every single one of these people have made other positive statements about Whedon in the past. But I think it's far more likely they were lying back then, or in some cases were in complete denial over what had happened. No one in this situation had anything to gain from speaking out against Whedon now. Some, like Ray Fisher, actually lost things. When many of them made positive statements about Whedon, they were working for him. Thus, he had direct control over their livelihood. Also, sad to say, there were clues pointing towards everything that has come out. As someone who has followed Whedon's career closely, considered myself a fan, and has even defended him, there's a lot we need to look at in terms of Whedon's problematic nature. So now, let's get into it.
Y'all can cater to the demon, cater to the dead man, but what about the black man?
I'm starting here for 2 reasons. One, it's the most directly connected to the Ray Fisher controversy, which brought all of this to light. And 2, because I think it's the least defensible of Whedon's controversies. Even back in the day, Whedon's staunchest defenders would pretty much just cringe when this was brought up, because there's not a whole lot that can be said in his defense. Heck, when I did my last video about Whedon, which was in defense of him, I wasn't able to defend this particular fact. I'm not really able to defend Whedon's problems with racial diversity. He's got a super bad track record of it. He's never had more than token diversity, and Firefly is completely devoid of any Asian characters, despite it being a plot point that this is a universe in which the United States and China dominated over everyone else. Chinese culture is used as a costume for white characters. If we look over Whedon's work as a whole, it's really quite glaring how few people of color there are. Within the Buffyverse, the only person of color to be in the main cast is Charles Gunn, played by J. August Richards. As much as I love Gunn, he also plays into scary black man stereotypes, with his character being a homeless gang member prior to becoming a member of Angel Investigations. He's also routinely portrayed as uncultured and uneducated compared to the rest of the white cast. It's through his interaction with these white characters that he starts to lose this urbanness. The last time we see his previous gang is in the episode That Old Gang of Mine, where they're specifically shown as violent antagonists. In a deal that's made with Wolfram and Hart in Season 5, Gunn receives the knowledge of the law magically, and his entire personality is changed in a process which I can only call mystical gentrification. When this magic smartness starts to fade Flowers for Algernon style, he's so desperate to hold on to it that he makes a deal that leads to the death of Fred. Outside of all of this, Gunn is also the least developed of any of the main characters on Angel. Aside from his brief romance with Fred and his friendly rivalry with Wesley, he receives very little in terms of character arc. What do we really know about Gunn's backstory other than his sister was killed by vampires and he sold his soul for a truck? Buffy's really not much better when it comes to characters of color. In fact, I'd say it's actually worse. At least Angel had one character. While recurring characters such as Spike and Faith outlived their initial planned storylines, characters Mr. Trick and Kendra were killed before they had much development, despite having great amounts of potential. Riley is shown to have 2 friends, Graham, who is white, and Forrest, who is black. Graham is a neutral character who remains an ally for Riley, leaving Sunnydale when the initiative does, and eventually returning to bring Riley back into the fold. Forrest is the main opposition to Buffy within the initiative until he's killed and turned into a demonic zombie. Sunnydale High and UC Sunnydale are almost completely bereft of people of color, to the point that Whedon, Marty Noxon, and Seth Green go out of their way on the commentary to Wild at Heart to point out Asian Dan, an extra who turns up in multiple episodes but is never out of the background. There would be some potentials of color in Season 7, including prominent characters Rona and Kennedy. One of them was even a queer woman of color. Racism solved. Except Rona, like Forrest before her, was portrayed as being one of the characters most in opposition to Buffy. Kennedy was also specifically written to be the opposite of Willow's previous love interest Tara, making her argumentative, pushy, and very aggressive. Aside from these two, the most prominent person of color was Chow Ann, who received no character aside from foreigner can't speak English and is therefore funny. One of the most glaring racial problems in Buffy is the portrayal of the Calderosh Romani. This is a very real group of people, almost exclusively referred to by the slur gypsies. The most prominent Romani characters within Buffy were played by 2 white actors. Romani culture is used with the sensitivity of a Party City Halloween costume, just serving as a plot device to curse Angelus, playing on the stereotype of gypsy curses. The Calderosh characters are portrayed as villainous, even though they're opponents to the villainous Angelus. We're told outright that they're not interested in justice, but vengeance. It's only through assimilating into white society as Jenny Calendar that Yana Calderosh becomes a heroic character. The only times Calderosh magic are used for good is when they're wielded by a white woman, Willow. This problem comes up earlier in Buffy on a smaller scale within the episode The Pack, in which the real Messiah people have some incredibly incorrect and racist attributes given to them in order to use them as a plot device for the episode. They're portrayed as savages who practice ritual sacrifice. We go into this in great deal in the Return to the Hellmouth episode on The Pack, so I suggest you go to listen to that if you want more information. There's also the racial implications behind the first Slayer, who is usually referred to solely as the Primitive and portrayed as a growling naked warrior who is little more than a beast who is unable to speak, except through a white character acting as her mouthpiece. One prominent person of color who survives Buffy is Robin Wood. He's shown to be an educated man in a position of power who receives a lot of backstory and ultimately survives the show. However, Robin's race is mostly due to needing to connect to the character of Nikki Wood, who was introduced in the earlier episode Fool for Love. Nikki's sole appearance prior to Robin's introduction was as an homage to blaxploitation, thus she was another character fulfilling a racial stereotype. The role of Nikki was also recast after her initial appearance because they wanted someone who looked, quote, more vulnerable. When Nikki needed to look tough and threatening, she was the darker-skinned April Whedon, and when she needed to look vulnerable and sympathetic, she was the biracial Katie Aubrette. When Whedon and his problems with race are discussed, Firefly is the most cited critique because, really, the racial problems are just right there. Firefly did improve on Whedon's track record by having 2 whole people of color as main cast members, with Afro-Latina Gina Torres and Black Ron Glass as part of the crew of Serenity. But just having people of color in a show is pretty much the bare minimum that can be done. It's a bar so low you can trip over it. And the problem with Firefly isn't who is there, but who isn't. The premise of Firefly is that America and China merged into the Anglo-Sino alliance. Chinese culture is used throughout the show, showing up in set design, costuming, and badly translated swearing. Several of the characters have names that suggest at least mixed ancestry, such as the Tams in Atherton Wing. Whedon said he had initially meant for the character of Kaylee to be of Asian descent, but he fell in love with Jewel State. I've never been fond of this argument because it just makes things more glaring. If you want to have an Asian actress, you should have just auditioned Asian actresses for the role. Whedon also said that Summer Glau, who played River Tam, looked kind of Asian. Summer Glau is of Irish and German descent, which, last time I checked, in no way equaled being Asian. What happened on Firefly was an amped-up version of the treatment of the Romani and Maasai on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. A real culture was used as set dressing to add flavor without feeling the need to properly represent the race from which that culture comes. One thing I don't often see brought up in terms of Firefly is that Asian culture is much more associated with the core worlds. The core is portrayed as the villains of Firefly, with the white cowboys on the rim being the good guys. Not only is the Asian-influenced culture shown to be the more villainous, but the heroes are explicitly based on the Confederates from the Civil War. Whedon plays on the fallacy that many Confederates were fighting for states' rights, as the Independents were fighting for the freedom from the Alliance. However, that's a massive exaggeration and a romanticization of the Confederate Army, and the rights they were fighting for were the rights to own slaves. There's also unfortunate implications with the Reavers, the cannibalistic, savage rapists that roam through space. Whedon acknowledged in interviews that they were meant as analogies for the Apaches in old westerns, which, yikes. I would say something about the racist implications of Dollhouse and the Avengers, but honestly I'm hard-pressed to come up with any real representation. I'm not sure how much influence Whedon had on the casting of Pietro and Wanda Maximoff, but he certainly had some. And he again falls into the same trap he did on Buffy, casting 2 white actors to portray characters of Romani descent. This minimization of people of color tracks with the complaints Ray Fisher had about the filming of Justice League. While Zack Snyder was still with the project, the character of Cyborg was supposed to be the heart of the piece, and this seemed to be the case going forward with the Snyder Cut. Other people of color were removed from the roles, as Cyborg's family members were greatly reduced in screen time or removed altogether, as well as Barry Allen's love interest, Iris West. So why do I think Whedon has done all this? I think he's someone who is really enamored of his own experience. He wants to write about that, and since his experience is as a white man, this is reflective in his work. People of color appear in service to white characters and aren't given the same nuance. While characters of color are limited, foreign cultures are used as plot devices and set dressing. They're not respected as an actual lifestyle of another group and are instead used to bolster the white characters. This on its own would be damning enough and has been a major reason why many haven't enjoyed Whedon's work. This by itself is incredibly problematic and has been for years. But this isn't all there is.
And it just decides to give those nuns safe passage. Those were my nuns! Yeah, nuns are your thing. Everybody knows that. They respect it. They respect us.
One of the issues Charisma Carpenter leveled against Whedon was his intolerance for her religious beliefs. Whedon is an avowed atheist, and it comes through within his work.
Oh my God.
Oh, your God what?
Oh, well, you know, not my God, because I defy him and all of his works. Does he exist? Is there word on that, by the way?
Nothing solid.
There are only 2 characters in Whedon's work I can think of as being religious within the context of the shows, and that's Riley Finn from Buffy and Shepherd Book from Firefly. In Riley's case, it's only shown once, and it's mostly there to portray him as this aw shucks Iowa farm boy. Shepherd Book follows some sort of space Christianity, and it's revealed through the comics written by Whedon that he's not even an actual shepherd, but he had killed one and then took his identity, and then later becomes the Masks and accepts this as his role. The other characters who are portrayed as religious are turned away from this path. In the case of Drusilla, it's because she's robbed of her soul through corruption of her vampirism. Malcolm Reynolds is disillusioned by losing the Battle of Serenity, turning his back on his faith.
I recall as a boy, though, I couldn't help but think, what would happen if you were at the Last Supper and you ordered the white?
Oh yeah, him too. Caleb was a member of the clergy legitimately, but he was also a misogynistic serial killer. He was so evil that the first evil said, hey, I want that guy on my team. There was no reason why Caleb had to be a priest. It was a stylistic choice on Whedon's part simply because he didn't like religion, and he even used Caleb as a mouthpiece for some of what Whedon thinks of as religious absurdities. One of the biggest problems with religion is something that's not talked about often. The only people I've heard bring it up were my co-hosts on Return to the Hellmouth, Jan and David. I miss you, David, and I know you would have loved this video. Willow Rosenberg is repeatedly said to be Jewish. The fact she doesn't really practice is not a problem in and of itself. There are lots of people who identify as Jewish but don't practice. When it becomes a problem is when characters, Willow included, make a lot of casual Nazi references. Like, a lot. There's no world in which Willow Danielle Rosenberg would use the phrase, "the only solution is the final solution." And yet she does in I Only Have Eyes for You. Now, there's no problem with Whedon being an atheist. There is also no problem with that being reflected in his shows. When it becomes a problem is when he uses bits and pieces of religion for his own use and tosses the actual beliefs out as garbage. Crosses, crucifixes, and holy water are all used as tools against vampires, but religion is fairly routinely dismissed as silly superstition. Those who do believe are made jokes or victims. This is clear in Whedon's upset that Charisma Carpenter got a tattoo of a rosary to display her faith, thinking it wasn't something Cordelia would have. Despite using religious imagery in fighting against vampires, Whedon was unwilling to use this as a hand wave for Cordelia's tattoo because Charisma Carpenter actually believed in the faith, and that offended him. But there's no religion Whedon disrespects more than Wicca. Witches are present through Buffy's whole run. And I'm not willing to say, oh well, they're just supposed to be magic witches, because the term Wicca and Wiccans are frequently used. There's also an episode specifically where Willow becomes offended by the stereotypes of wicked witches. However, religious aspects are frequently the subject of mockery. Willow calls them wanna blessed bees, because they very reasonably think she's just there to play with magic. Despite two of the main characters being identified as Wiccan, it's all about them casting spells and almost never showing them having any sort of proper belief. They even have Willow lose track of the phases of the moon after Oz leaves, because why the heck would a Wiccan need to know the phases of the moon? This all adds up to Whedon not caring about faith. He likes to use imagery from it the same way he likes to use Chinese imagery in Firefly. It's fun set dressing for him to use, but actually going any deeper into it is something he's not interested in doing, because it's not a part of his life experience. Whedon forces his beliefs on all of his characters because they're not fully developed people, but avatars of himself.
And you were hoping some of them would, puff out a bit so that you could be the cool one, but that did not take place.
This is an interesting one because I don't feel like Whedon's ever really denied he has an issue with weight. Not only does his work contain a lot of fat shaming, he's done fat shaming openly in interviews, often directed at himself. It may seem the normal thing for heroes to be fit and thin, but there's always been an extra layer of mean-spiritedness in how weight is dealt with in Whedon's works. Whedon has spoken repeatedly with how he almost didn't cast Amber Benson as Tara because he thought Tara should be small and less womanly. Now, I've seen Amber Benson in person. I could fit Amber Benson in my pocket. This is what she looked like during the run of Buffy. There is also Miracle Laurie from Dollhouse. Laurie spoke on Whedon's behalf because he told her that going on a diet was unnecessary for her, despite the fact she was a size 12. To quote Laurie, he was trying to show that a size 12 woman is normal, sexy, beautiful, and strong. Now, I don't want to discount Laurie's experience, because if she got something positive out of it, I'm really happy for her. But two things. One, a size 12 is barely above a medium. Two, the whole point of casting a larger actress was not to celebrate her size, but to subvert expectations. Whedon didn't want anyone to realize that November was a doll, so he didn't want to cast someone that, well, most likely someone he didn't think personally was that fuckable. Kaylee on Firefly was also supposed to be a big girl to reflect how average and down-to-earth she was. Yeah. So it's pretty obvious why Whedon would think a 126-pound Carpenter was fat and would say something similar to the pregnant Rebecca X. I don't know if this was a specifically Whedon problem, but certainly the shows never had any clue how to dress anyone who wasn't a size 0. Amber Benson tended to look larger because they just could not put her in flattering clothing. And I still have nightmares about Cordelia's maternity wear. Outside of these actresses, who were nowhere near plus-sized, I'm hard-pressed to come up with any fat characters, just the Jabba ripoff from Bad Girls. Whedon's issues with weight don't seem to be very different than a majority of the men in Hollywood. But that doesn't make it okay. It's just something we need to have on the record here.
Don't worry, we're sure to spot Faith first. She's like this cleavagey slut bomb.
This section can also be called Whedon has issues with relationships, which is something he's never denied. I do honestly think there's a problem with how Whedon portrays relationships, and it's firmly rooted in his personal life. However, I don't think portraying doomed relationships is particularly problematic. What is problematic is his portrayal of sexuality. As a show about growing from teen to adulthood, it's no surprise Buffy should deal heavily with sexuality. But the way it's dealt with always had an air of shame attached to it. Female characters are invariably punished for their sexuality. Buffy's first sexual experience leads to Angel reverting to Angelus in what Whedon called his bad boyfriend metaphor. If it were just Buffy and Angel, it would be one thing. But Buffy is punished once again when Parker turns out to be a selfish user who was just interested in one-night stands. The only difference with him is the monster allegory is missing. The first time Willow and Tara are allowed to have an on-camera love scene is essentially a rape, as Tara is under a memory spell, robbing her of her agency to be angry with Willow. Their second love scene ends with Tara being shot by Warren. On Angel, the first time Cordelia is shown to have sex, the first time the audience knows for certain Cordelia has had sex, she ends up impregnated by some demon spawn that used Cordelia's date as a surrogate father. Characters who are shown to be comfortable in their sexuality are either villainized, such as Faith and Veruca, or made to be the figures of mockery, like Anya. The uniting factor is that their enjoyment of sex is treated as out of the ordinary. This is only increased on Firefly. Anara is a companion, a high-class legal sex worker akin to a courtesan. She is repeatedly and frequently called a whore by Malcolm Reynolds, in what's supposed to be a will they, won't they back and forth. Because nothing says I'm worthy of your affections by denigrating your perfectly legal and respected profession. Of course, the most controversial sexual relationship Whedon has ever done is the one between Buffy and Spike. Now, a lot of people feel a lot of ways about Buffy and Spike. Personally, I shipped it, before it actually happened on the show. And I even initially enjoyed it. But looking back on it now, it's shocking how such a kinky relationship can be so kink-shaming. There's literally nothing wrong with having a kinky sexual relationship. But the way kink is always portrayed in Whedon's work, and in particular Buffy and Spike's relationship, it's something deviant. It's something wrong. Buffy doesn't have kinky sex with Spike because she likes it, but because she's trying to punish herself, and punish Spike because he loves her. Spike, meanwhile, engages in kinky sex because he's soulless, and all the soulless evil characters engage in kinky sex. Another thing that's frequently discussed is Whedon's use of sexualized violence. When I made my previous video, I pointed out that there's actually quite a bit of sexual abuse against male characters, as well as female characters. You can also look at his use of sexual assault. It's brought up a lot when talking about Buffy or Dollhouse. But what isn't brought up is that he's pretty equal opportunity when it comes to assault. Buffy, Tara, Drusilla, Cordelia, Echo, and Priya all suffer from attempted or successful sexual assaults. But so do Spike, Xander, Riley, Oz, Connor, and Anthony. Not that I'm saying the use of sexual assault is okay. It's used way too much in all media, and Joss falls back on it quite a bit. But Joss isn't really victimizing women, he's victimizing characters, and he does it pretty equal opportunity. Looking back on it, I was, to quote a very old meme, interrogating the text from the wrong perspective. I was correct. Just as many men are victimized with sexual assault as women, but they aren't equal. Of the women, only Tara, Cordelia, and Echo don't suffer from sexualized violence, with their sexual assaults being what TV tropes calls double standard rape sci-fi. With this trope, the show itself doesn't acknowledge what happens as rape, because the mystical stuff involved. It's only outside criticism that rightfully calls what happened to them assault. What makes the mystical rape double standard all the worse is that Whedon already metatextually acknowledges that it's rape in the episode Dead Things. Jonathan and Andrew don't realize that they're about to rape Katrina because the magical aspect of it, until it's pointed out by her. This happens in the same season as Tara's rape, and before Cordelia and Echo had what happened to them. So Whedon was completely aware of what he was doing. What happens to Buffy, Drusilla, and Priya is absolutely portrayed as sexual assault. They are violent and meant to harm. With Buffy, it even happens multiple times. The episode Reptile Boy even uses an attempt to sacrifice Buffy to a reptile demon as a metaphor for date rape. As Buffy is roofied by a frat boy, he nearly assaults her and then stops so that Buffy can remain virginal for a ritual sacrifice to what is basically a sentient penis. All of the men I mentioned in my first video were absolutely sexually assaulted, but none of them were ever treated as sexual assault. Veruca forces Oz into sex, and it's treated as if she's seduced him, and it's his failing. Riley believes he was having sex with Buffy, and Buffy spends the next episode feeling betrayed. Anthony's sexual assaults are never really addressed. Spike's sexual assault by Buffy is treated as a joke. Xander's assault is only treated as an attempt to kill him rather than anything sexualized. Connor's sexual assault is the worst of all, following the 6 stages of grooming to the absolute letter, but he's treated as a romantic rival by his own father. Whedon uses sexual assault as a weapon against women, another punishment for them being sexual. The assaults that happen to the men aren't treated as assaults, because in Whedon's mind, rape is something that happens to women. One of the worst examples is one that thankfully didn't reach the screen, but has been spoken about by various creatives. In the pilot of Firefly, when the Reavers, who we've been told,
if they take the ship, they'll rape us to death, eat our flesh, and sew our skins into their clothing. And if we're very, very lucky, they'll do it in that order.
Passes close by Serenity, Inara is shown with a syringe, which most viewers thought was some sort of poison, in order to kill herself before the ship was boarded. It was later revealed at conventions that the plan for that syringe was that it was basically an instant death STD. In an unwritten episode, after being slut-shamed by Mal, Inara was going to be kidnapped by the Reavers. She would have taken this syringe and been gang-raped by them, killing them in the process. It is only after Inara is rescued that Mal would finally treat her like a lady. Gee, it's a real shame that show was cancelled. Are there still petitions up?
Well, hello, gay now.
Without a doubt, Whedon was a trailblazer when it came to queer representation. For a lot of young queer kids, myself included, Willow Rosenberg and Tara McClay were one of the first committed gay relationships we got to see. But looking back at the relationship, there was a lot of flaws in it. Now, some of this can be chalked up to what was allowed by network standards and practices, with gay relationships being particularly scrutinized. However, not everything can be excused away. For baby buys like me, it was remarkably frustrating that Willow's sexuality was treated as a light switch going from straight to gay, including Willow having lines like, "Gay now," and in the episode Him, while under a love spell, making her attracted to the male RJ, she decided to turn him into a woman. What makes Willow's transformation into a gay woman all the more frustrating is that we were really robbed of a proper coming out story. So much of Willow and Tara's early relationship was couched in the metaphor of casting spells. We never got to see Willow truly deal with how she was feeling, and it could have been something beautiful. Bisexuality is never considered as an option for Willow. It's treated as an act that evil people do, with Wishverse Willow, Darla, Drusilla, Spike, and Angelus, the only characters who have had sex with people of both genders. And according to Joss, this is because
I just want to say, Angel and Spike, they were hanging out for years and years and years. They were in, all kinds of deviant. They were vampires. Are we thinking they never? Come on, people. I'm just saying.
The only other bisexuality within any of the shows is when, in Firefly, Inara is shown to be servicing a female client, and it is the entire reason for the meme.
I'll be in my bunk.
It is titillation, plain and simple. It's not just bisexuals that get pretty crap representation. Male homosexuality is limited pretty much to Xander having gay panic over Larry being open with his sexuality. To make matters worse, this was supposed to be a hint that Xander might be gay. Instead of deciding on a trajectory for a specific character, Whedon decided to throw random hints in that either Willow or Xander could have been gay, and then later decide what direction he wanted to go. The reason this doesn't work is that hints were really awful. In other representation, Andrew was made to be sexually immature and in love with the psychotic Warren because, as Whedon said to The Advocate, Tom has a bit of a fae thing going on in his persona. One of the big problems with Whedon's queer representation comes from the death of Tara. This is something I addressed in my last video, so let's hear from past Emcee. In season 4 of Buffy, he started to set up that Willow was delving into dark magic. This was eventually supposed to come to a head in season 5, with Oz being killed, and Willow going fully dark because of it. Unfortunately, Seth Green, who played Oz, decided to leave the show. Whedon had also planned to have one of Buffy's friends come out as gay in season 4. I think he was initially going to have it be Xander, and that's why he ended season 3 single. But since Green was leaving and Whedon liked Emma Caulfield's Anya, he switched from Xander to Willow. So Willow came out, she got a girlfriend in Tara. The storyline was extended because Joss liked Tara so much, but eventually she was killed off. There were cries Whedon was falling onto tired homophobic cliches by killing off gay characters or making them evil. Only, that wasn't Whedon's intent. He had planned to do that storyline regardless of the sexual preference of the characters. He saw the characters as story elements rather than as representations of people. Is it a problem? Yeah, but it's not the same problem that Whedon is being accused of. Now, I don't think past Emcee was wrong, in the most technical, shallow of ways. The only problem is that it suggests Whedon was completely unaware of the bury your gays trope. Whedon is a writer who has made his career on knowing tropes and subverting them. Yet this is one he trundled right into because he wanted to do it. By treating his characters as interchangeable, he doesn't show the proper care that's needed in writing queer characters, which is the same problem he had when writing characters of color. Equality isn't treating all of your characters as equal, but looking at their traits and attributes and giving them proper respect. Not only does he bury the gays, he hits the evil lesbian trope as well. To make matters worse, season 6, when this happens, changes the magic into a metaphor for drugs, when it had previously been a metaphor for lesbian sex. So not only does Willow, who at that point was an avowed lesbian, become evil, the coming out story we got for her, such as it was, is tainted by magic being portrayed as something dangerous. Now something that's always bothered me is Whedon talking about the plans to bring Tara back. I'm not talking about in Conversations with Dead People, because I fully believe that he wanted Amber Benson to come back, but she didn't want to hurt the fans by showing Tara as the first evil. But after Buffy was over, Whedon came out with this strange story about how he planned to have Buffy get some sort of wish or something from the powers that be, and it was going to be to bring Tara back from the dead. But he didn't get to do that because Benson didn't want to come back, and something which Benson hadn't heard about. And I call absolute bullshit. It doesn't match up with what happened in season 7. The story he laid out is frankly facile. The powers that be were confined primarily to Angel and not Buffy. It was also a story that only came out about a decade after Buffy ended. It was never part of the plan, and is something I legitimately think he came up with afterwards in an attempt to appease the queer fans who were upset about the bury your gays trope being used. And he put the blame on Benson for it. For a time, what Whedon did for the queer community was groundbreaking. But I don't know if it was so much because he wanted to be inclusive as much as he wanted to be provocative. Which I suppose brings us to the next and last point. I know there's an Exhibit F. I really don't want to do it. Yeah. I know I have to.
But you're just a girl.
That's what I keep saying.
Oh boy. Let's strap in for this one. This is going to be the hard one to talk about. Not because it's any worse than any of the others. Honestly, it's not. But it's the one we were all tricked by. Whedon's problems with race and religion and sexuality were all pretty obvious. But this is something Whedon was lauded for. For a long time, Whedon was considered the feminist writer. He was the bestest for his writing of female characters. And credit where credit is due. He did write a show about the empowerment of women in a time when we didn't get a lot of those, and became the template for many shows of that ilk. The writer's room for his shows, specifically Buffy, had a wide number of women in them, and when he gave more attention to Firefly, showrunner duties for Buffy were given over to Marty Noxon. However, the cracks in Whedon's feminism become clear if you just look at why he created Buffy in the first place. Whedon wasn't inspired by the idea of empowering women. That was incidental to his main goal. Whedon has always been about subverting expectations. You see it throughout his work. He'll find a trope, and then he'll decide to zig instead of zag on it. That's exactly what happened with Buffy. He saw the trope of the woman who gets killed in the opening minutes of the horror movie, and he wanted to subvert that by making the waifish teenage girl the person the monster was afraid of. Who is someone who wouldn't be able to handle this situation, and how do I make them handle it? Whedon's feminism was built from this premise, not the other way around. He was patted on the back for what he did with female characters, so he decided to play up the feminist message because it made him look better. There is a big flaw in this message, though.
Thank God we're hot chicks with superpowers.
For all of the summing up of the show that goes on in Chosen, it's this line that's the real edict of the show. A hot chick with superpowers. There is a fetishistic aspect to the female characters Whedon chooses to focus on. While yes, television has a certain expectation of beauty, there is a very specific type of woman Whedon chooses for his heroines. As aptly put in his Vulture profile, he wanted to be her, and he wanted to fuck her. There's nothing inherently wrong with casting attractive actresses. It's Hollywood. That's kind of how the game is played. Part of the problem is the empowerment of Whedon's characters is their lack of agency. The Slayers have no choice in their calling. It's forced upon them when they're children. Buffy was 15 when she was called, and we see in flashbacks her youth is played up during the scene. The same thing can be applied to River and the dolls in the dollhouse. They have their abilities thrust upon them, with only the dolls having something of a say in becoming what they are, although it can be argued they had little idea as to what they were signing up for. With few exceptions, they are also under the command of older male characters. The Watchers Council is overwhelmingly male, and even when Buffy quits the council, she still looks to Giles to guide him. River is a victim of the Hands of Blue, and she's then under Malcolm and her brother when she's freed. The idea of power is also something that's struggled with, as Willow's power becomes something she's unable to control for 4 seasons. She goes back and forth on whether or not it's something she controls or controls her. There's also the fact that Buffy is almost always paired with a man of nearly equal power to her. Angel, Riley, and Spike are all presented as possessing superhuman abilities. Buffy is presented as exceptional and can only be with men who are just as exceptional as her. These men are able to tame her, and when Riley loses his superhuman abilities, the cracks appear in their relationship. Yes, along with Whedon's issues with women, we have heaping doses of toxic masculinity. The main offender of this is the character of Xander, who has such specific and rigid ideas as to what being a man entails. What makes this worse is that Xander is Whedon's self-admitted self-insert. He acts as the quintessential nice guy, feeling entitled to Buffy's affections and being incredibly cruel to her when she rejects him. He specifically cites Buffy's need for superhuman men when she does. As enumerated in the sex section, Whedon has issues with female sexuality, and that is deeply connected to their power. Buffy is attacked sexually and threatened with sexual assault on many occasions, but she's able to get out of it because of her superpowers. So it's unsurprising in the episode where she does lose her superpowers, helpless, she's threatened with sexual violence by both a random guy on the street and Kralik. Not to mention, the very act of getting the Slayer powers in Get It Done is portrayed in very rapey overtones. That Buffy's feminist message was a fluke becomes clear when you look at the rest of Whedon's work. While Firefly does have strong and diversely strong female characters, they're always in subservient roles to Mal. With Angel, all of his female characters end up enduring horrible fates, with 3 of the biggest ones dying in the act of giving birth, making their demises highly gendered. While I haven't talked much about Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, the treatment of Penny shows off Whedon's issues with women, as she's treated as a commodity by both Dr. Horrible and Hammer, basically just a prize to be fought over by both of them until her untimely death. Dollhouse is probably the most damning of Whedon's works, as he's obviously trying to repeat the success he had with Buffy, but his limited feminism shone through. In his attempt to make another power fantasy, he ironically made something that came off as exploitative and outdated. One of the biggest problems people had with the Age of Ultron was the portrayal of the character of Black Widow, in which she's mostly seen as a love interest for the Hulk, and she reveals to him that she allowed herself to be sterilized by the Red Room, thus is a monster like he is. Now, I made some points about this in my last video, but honestly, when you take all of Whedon's works into account, it really comes off as very bad, especially when you consider that Scarlett Johansson was actually pregnant at the time, and with everything that happened with Charisma Carpenter, it wouldn't surprise me if putting in that line about sterilization was something to get back at her. I honestly don't think Whedon sought out to be a fake feminist. I think he honestly believed he was one, because we all told him he was. He wanted to make a show that went against the norms of the time, and he inadvertently tapped into a need, and he ended up buying his own hype.
And it really did run the gamut from extreme joy to large hatred, and
and
you know,
fear in between,
and some in between. There was some joyful hatred.
I've spent an hour going over this evidence. No, I've spent years going over this evidence because it took me that long to write it. Because it was honestly incredibly hard for me to look at all of this stuff again. I didn't relish in doing this. As someone who loved so much of Whedon's work, everything that came out really hurt. None of this evidence was necessary. We knew what the truth was. Of course, everyone who said anything about Joss Whedon is telling the truth. There's no reason for them not to. And going back over all of this, all of the jokes that were made about Joss Whedon is my master now were misplaced. Those kinds of jokes are always misplaced. As Whedon said himself,
every man ever got a statue made of him. Was one kind of sumbitch or another.
Joss Whedon is guilty. He is guilty of being an asshole, and one with incredibly problematic work. And his sentence is persona non grata. If Joss Whedon is attached to a project, that's not something I'm going to engage in. That's why I haven't watched The Nevers, and I don't plan to. But for all of the work he did prior to Justice League, all of the work he's accused of being a jerk on the set of, I'm still willing to let that in. All of the people who worked on them had a problem with Whedon, but they've spoken fondly of their experiences on the set, even after they were open about their experiences. I'm not willing to toss away the work that they suffered to make. As for the problematic natures of Buffy, Angel, Firefly, and the others, Some of the things I can still see good in. Buffy and Angel remain two of my favorite shows. Whedon isn't allowed to take that away. They helped me out in a very dark time. I absolutely think it's important to look at all of the things I've listed in this video. Engage in a healthy dialogue about the aspects that work and the things that don't. I also think you can enjoy the programs without engaging in the reverence of the creator that Whedon has enjoyed for much of his career. Whatever Whedon's intentions, subconscious or no, with his shows, what I got out of them is what's important. Maybe I'm speaking from a position of privilege, but what I gained from the show isn't dependent on what Whedon's intent was. I can still watch and like the things he worked on, especially for the work of the hundreds of people who had to suffer through Whedon's jackassery. But looking back, everything is going to come with an asterisk now. So comment down below with your thoughts on Joss Whedon, the Buffyverse, the MCU, and problematic creators. If you like my videos, please subscribe to my channel. If you want to support me, please visit my Patreon. You can also buy me a coffee, or you can go to my Redbubble and TeePublic and buy my geeky graphic designs. So until next time, live long, and may the Force be with you.